Hello and welcome to yet another virtual event here with Tattered Cover. My name is Adam and I am the director of events with Tattered Cover. And if you don't know where Tattered Cover is, because this is virtual, you could be anywhere in the world. We are Colorado's largest independent bookstore based in Denver, Colorado. We have 5 stores currently. We're expanding to a 6th one. And we are continuing to do virtual events to keep everyone safe and sound. We do have some in-person events, but for those here on the virtual world, I want to highlight the ones we have upcoming. We have many in September, including Brant Cooper, who wrote a book about empowering people, creating value, and driving change in a book called Disruption Proof. That'll be in about a month on September 22nd. Before I go any further, I do want to say that there is closed captioning available if you want or need it. At the bottom of your YouTube screen, there should be a black bar with a button that says CC. That will be your closed captioning for those who want or need it. Tonight, I am so excited to welcome the author of Graveyard Fields, Stephen Tingle. He was born and raised in Western North Carolina. Before becoming a writer, he was a golf resort manager, real estate developer, and restaurateur. As a journalist specializing in travel style and food and drink, his work has appeared in the Robb Report, Modern Luxury, Town, Tempest, and Discovery. He now lives in upstate South Carolina with his wife, Jess. Please give a warm welcome virtually to Stephen Tingle, the debut author of Graveyard Fields. Stephen, welcome.
Hey, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us all the way from the other side of the country. This is what's amazing
about to be here.
Yeah,
I'm in my house, so I'm happy to be here in my house. But yeah,
yes,
happy to be with you.
Yes, definitely. I do have to say, I've seen many authors' backgrounds. I love your framed photos, and
thank you.
I love seeing a map up, even if it's just like artwork. I love a map.
Means nothing, but thank you.
Yeah, for sure. We're here to talk about Graveyard Fields, which is your debut book. Tell readers a little bit about it.
Graveyard Fields tells the story of Davis Reed, who's a private detective, but not a very good private detective. He's got a laundry list of issues, but he's self-aware. He knows about all of his issues, and he really enjoys brewing his own beer and drinking as much of it as he can. And he's from Charleston, South Carolina, but he's moved to the mountains of Western North Carolina to get away from some bad business that happened in Charleston. And he's going to try to get out of the detective business altogether and try his hand at writing a book about a bomber plane that crashed on the side of Cold Mountain in the mid 1940s, which is actually a true story. That really happened. But he's as bad of an author as he is a private detective, so he doesn't get much done. But he meets a bunch of interesting, bizarre characters, and it leads him down different rabbit holes, and which, of course, it's a mystery and a detective fiction. So, of course, there's a dead body in there somewhere. And a bunch of interesting stuff happens to him. So,
of course, and before I ask you a bunch of questions, because I have so many, I would love to hear you read a little bit from it, if you don't mind. What would you be reading for us tonight?
This is probably about a quarter of the way through the book. So while Davis is researching the book he's trying to write about the bomber plane that crashed on the side of the Cold Mountain, he's walking along a mountain trail and he finds a set of keys. Mm-hmm. These keys end up leading him down this rabbit hole that I was talking about. But his friend and landlord, Deputy Dale Johnson, tells him just to take the keys to the sheriff's department and turn them in. Somebody will claim them. So this is Davis going to the sheriff's department to turn these keys in.
Take it away.
The Haywood County Sheriff's Department was located just off Main Street in the middle of downtown Waynesville. The street was a half-mile long strip flanked by restaurants, real estate offices, and a disturbingly high number of stores selling cinnamon brooms and enamel mugs. Waynesville was a tourist town, and proudly so, but it was mid-November and the sidewalks were practically empty. I guess things would pick up closer to Thanksgiving, which was only a few days away. I didn't know how the store stayed in business during these cold winter months. I would just have to add that to the long list of things I didn't know. I pulled into the sheriff's department parking lot and found an empty spot marked visitor. I walked through the department's front door and entered a small lobby where the top of a gray bouffant hovered near the far side of a tall counter. How can I help you? The Buffont's owner said as I approached. I'm looking for Dale Johnson. He's on patrol at the moment. Is there something I can assist you with? Can you give him this? I put the key ring on the counter. The woman, who, if her name tag could be trusted, was Barbara, grabbed a yellow Post-it note. And your name is? Davis Reed. She wrote my name on the note, saying the words out loud as she jotted them down. When she finished, she gave me a knowing look. Wait a minute, you're the writer. I was about to tell her she was wrong. I'd been known as many things in my life: officer, private detective, liar, drunk, asshole. But writer was new to me, especially since I'd not yet written a word. Deputy Johnson told me about you, Barbara said. He says you're writing a book about Cold Mountain. You know, there's already a book about that. So I've heard. I'm a writer too. I have a blog. It's about Southern cooking. I write down all the steps of a recipe and post them along with pictures I take with my phone. The last one was about pinto beans. It's a popular blog. I have over 30 readers. You should look it up. It's called barbscountrykitchen.com. As Barbara spelled out the website address, I heard a sound behind me. When I turned, a skinny man about my age was walking in my direction. He wore greasy blue coveralls and a camouflage ball cap with the Ford logo stamped on the front. His limp was much worse than mine. His left leg dragged behind him like a broken tree limb. The man hobbled up to the counter and looked directly at Barbara, ignoring me altogether. His body odor was ungodly, and I took a step to the side to get out of its range. One step didn't work. I needed to take about 50 more. What do you want now, Floppy? Barbara asked. It's the same as last time. Someone's broken into my garage. Is anything missing? No, but my things is out of order, my tools and stuff. I keep my things organized, and when I went in this morning, my plug wrench wasn't where I left it yesterday, and my jumper cables was on the floor, not on the hook where they supposed to be. I know, because I keep my things organized. Barbara rolled her eyes and let out a deep sigh. The man glanced at the key ring sitting on the counter and cocked his head like a dog reacting to a high-pitched whistle. He then looked over at me as if I'd just magically appeared. His eyes gave me a once-over from head to toe. I looked back at him and smiled. I assumed this was the notorious Floppy Johnson, the grandson of the man who'd claimed to find, then lose, or maybe not lose, a chest full of gold. Dale had said Floppy was crazy, which was always a vague diagnosis at best. But from what little I'd witnessed of Floppy so far, I thought Dale might be right on the money. Who are you? Floppy asked me. I don't know you. I ain't never seen you before. You from around here? Because I know just about everybody around here, and if I'd seen you before, I'd remember you. But you don't look familiar to me. So what's your name? Where are you from? Floppy, leave this man alone, Barbara said. She then pushed a button on an antiquated intercom system that sat next to her computer. As she spoke, she leaned down so close to the microphone, I thought she might take a bite of it. Deputy Norris, could you come out front, please? A moment later, a door behind the counter with private written across the front opened, and my arch nemesis stepped through. Skeeter was wearing his mirrored aviators and rolling a toothpick between his clenched teeth. If my eyes had been lasered, I would have burned a hole through his face. Skeeter stared at me for a moment, then looked at the key ring sitting on the counter. Hey, Skeeter, Floppy said. You still drive that black Stang? I tell you, I think Sally could take her, maybe not off the line, but you give me a good stretch of road and Sally blow by you like you standing still. Now, my buddy Cecil has a Stang, but it's an old 5.0 and sounds like one of them big motel ice machines when it cranks up. Now, I don't never get that ice when I'm at the motel because you don't never know what's been in them little plastic buckets. Them nice motels give you the little bags to put in the bucket, but still, Floppy, Barbara yelled. Go with Officer Norris. Skeeter gave me a scowl, then turned around and walked back through the doorway. As Floppy followed him, I thought about Skeeter's black Stang and how I would enjoy etching the word prick into its hood. Sorry about that, Barbara said. Floppy's in here at least twice a month with some sort of emergency. She glanced toward the door, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. He thinks the government is out to get him, she whispered. The boys used to investigate every time he'd come in with a complaint, but now they just take a statement and forget about it. It seems to calm him down for a while. Why waste the time taking a statement, I said. Why not tell him to get lost? Barbara lowered her brows. Because he's Deputy Johnson's cousin. Now here, let me tell you more about my blog.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I always love to hear authors read, and with virtual events, we haven't really been doing a lot of reading. So I thank you for reading. It just really gets me going and in the zone.
Happy to.
You have a background as a writer, as a journalist. You have a background as many things. I kind of just want to hear, what was Stephen's path to get here? I mean, when did you decide to start writing? Why did you decide to start writing?
Sure. Yeah, I came about it a little late in life. I didn't go to journalism school or have a job at a newspaper or anything. I was in the golf business for many years. My parents owned a golf course in Western North Carolina in a little community called Crusoe, where the book is set, actually. Um, so I grew up there and lived there and worked there until I was probably 40, and decided when I turned 40 that that would be a really good time to have a midlife crisis. So I went ahead and did that to get that out of the way, uh, and switched gears completely and tried to decide what I wanted to do, something creative. And I was really into long form journalism, uh, stuff like the New Yorker and what Esquire was doing back then. This was 2010, I guess, 2011. Uh, and I was so naive, I just thought, oh, you just email these magazines and tell them that you want to write for them. And then they just, send you an assignment and then wheelbarrows full of money. And it didn't work like that at all.
Mhm.
Um, but I kept trying, and I actually I got an assignment from a golf trade publication, a magazine for golf course superintendents, and it was funny, Adam, because I had been dreaming about this for months and thinking this is what I really want to do, and finally got an assignment and thought, oh, holy shit, now I've actually got to do it.
Yeah.
And I Googled how to write a magazine article, how to quote people. I didn't know
Mhm.
anything about it. Uh, and somehow I got the assignment done. I sent it in, and the guy said, okay, here's your next one. And I just went from there and got more assignments from him. And that led to other magazines. And I'd really wanted to get away from golf, is part of the midlife crisis.
Mhm.
But writing for golf magazines got me started, got me some clips that I could use for other things. And then I kind of got in more of the travel and food and beverage stuff. And it just went from there.
Yeah, I definitely understand that hustle. I have a similar path, um, which I won't get too deep into, but you're right. It's like sometimes you just got to do it, and maybe you look like a fool the first time because you have no clue what you're doing, but then you
Or
get
the
one, you
second,
get
third,
two,
and fourth
three.
time. Sure. Yeah.
Definitely. So you're writing, you're doing freelance journalism, you're writing in all these publications. When does Graveyard Fields kind of come into your head when you finally say, "Oh, I'm gonna do a novel"?
It was probably 2016, I think, is when that started. So I've been doing magazine freelance writing for probably 5 years at that point, 6 years maybe. Um, and I'd been doing a lot of work for a great magazine called Tempest, which was a quarterly travel magazine for a private aviation company. And that magazine folded, so I had some free time on my hands. And I happened to read whatever the latest Michael Connelly novel was at that time, so spring of 2016 or whatever. And I loved it, like I love all of his books.
Yeah.
But when I finished it, I got jealous because I thought, man, this magazine stuff takes a lot of work. I got to go interview people. I got to record the interview. I got to transcribe the interview. I got to fact check this stuff. Then I got to quote the person exactly, even though I think I can say what they were trying to say better than they were saying it. And this Conley guy just gets to make shit up. And I want to do that. I want to see what that feels like. Um, so I just started at page one, almost as an experiment. I didn't have any outline, any real idea. I've always liked detective fiction, and I thought it would be cool to put a detective in the little town where I grew up and lived for so long, because it's just a beautiful town and there's some very interesting people there. And that's what I did. And I had to make him a pretty bad detective because I'm a pretty bad detective myself. So uh, that's how it worked out.
Yeah, before I want to get into like the idea of writing without really knowing what you're doing and just starting on page one, but you mentioned Connolly. Were you a big like reader as a kid? Did you read a lot of mystery, or was it a later in life discovery that you loved?
No, not as a kid. No, not at all. My mom was always has always been a huge reader of mystery and fiction, so it was always around the house. But man, it's embarrassing to say, but I don't think I read a novel until I was probably in my late 20s. If it wasn't assigned for
Yeah.
school, I probably didn't read those either, other than the Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't get into it until, yeah, probably late 20s. And then I just became obsessed with stuff like Michael Conley, John Sanford. And then I was I was probably in my early 30s. I was in a bookstore and I saw this. I don't know if you've heard of him, but this guy, Raymond Chandler, I just saw one of his novels and the cover was so cool. And I picked up that and just went through those like a beast. I just loved all that stuff. So yeah, I always loved it. Never had an idea that I would ever do it at all, but I enjoyed it as a fan, certainly.
For sure. And then so you finally sit down, you're writing Graveyard Fields or what becomes Graveyard Fields, page one. Do you eventually outline? Do you just say, hey, I'm just gonna take one page at a time, figure it out?
No, Adam, truth is I didn't because I didn't think I would ever finish it.
Sure.
I mean, I'm really good at not finishing things. So it was an experiment and I thought, oh, I'll do this for a little while. I'll get this out of my system. This is not how you pay the bills. I've got assignments to do for work. And then I kept going and after about 6 months, I guess I had 40,000 words and I thought, oh, wait a minute, this has got some weight to it now. This is about half of a novel right here. And then I had to decide, do I just chalk this up to an experiment or do I keep going?
And with mysteries, obviously, like you have to keep readers hooked. You have to have a mystery. Like that's important. It's not just
right.
Like it's hard. How early did you kind of figure things out then? Like, did you figure out, okay, this is where we're going. This is where Davis Reed is gonna like. When did you figure out the actual mystery itself? I guess.
Probably the third draft of the book.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't start in my head. It was a detective fiction just because he was a detective. But it was more about him personally and some of the demons he was fighting. And I really wanted to, and some of the demons he was fighting were my own demons that I felt like I need to get this out on the page. So the mystery was kind of came later.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, Davis is not a very good detective and just kind of stumbles on things but has a good heart. But yeah, that came later. The mystery really came later.
That kind of makes sense too. I mean, I care most about characters when I read. Plot, even when I'm reading mystery, is always second. Like I do care about solving things, but it's more like, do I care about going along for the ride? And Davis,
sure.
And this is in the publicity copy, he's plagued by 3 A's: anger, alcohol, and anxiety. And I'm not plagued by those things, but sure, like I connected with those things. And so you mentioned you made Davis not a great detective because, you're not a great detective.
Right.
How easy was it then just like having him bumble through things? Did you have to like think hard for like his character, or did it just kind of really come naturally?
Well, yeah, I say I didn't make him a good detective because I'm not a good detective. But then you're like, okay, how does he stumble onto this stuff? How do I get him where he needs to be to stumble onto these conclusions?
Mm-hmm.
And that was really the fun part, was creating these other characters that are in the periphery of the novel. People like Dale and Floppy, who really helped Davis out without necessarily trying to help him out, but are just in the right place at the right time and kind of act as a foil in a way to what Davis is trying to do.
Yeah. And the only thing I love is the setting, and it's obviously where you're from. I mean, maybe backwards, like where he lives now is where you,
Where I
right?
came from, right?
Um, was that like, I mean, was that an excuse? Were you traveling back to your hometown a lot to like get the vibe, or did you do that a lot because you knew the area so well?
Yeah. So I was there. I lived there until I was, I guess, 40, right at 40. Uh, but my mom still has a home there. And it's only an hour and a half from where I am in upstate South Carolina. So I was up there all the time. And then uh, as I was finishing the book, my mom had some health issues and I ended up moving in with her because it wasn't safe for her to be alone in her house. So I actually moved, and it's kind of weird to move back into the home where you were a teenager uh,
Yeah,
with your mom, and you're trying to write a book at the same time. So it was interesting, but it was very cool to finish the book while being right there in Crusoe. I thought
yeah,
was kind of neat. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, because I mean, I obviously haven't been to these locations. We talked about how I do like North Carolina before we connected live with the audience, but yeah, I can usually tell when a writer knows the location as opposed to they just research the location.
Sure. Yeah.
And yours,
Yeah.
yours felt so real. And then sorry, I keep going back to like just your writing, like your history. So you write the novel, you draft one, draft two, draft three, you figure out, oh, okay, this is how the mystery should work.
Right.
How many drafts did you end up doing
I
like
think there
full?
were four total. Yeah.
What did you focus on each time? Do you remember? Was like each one very specific, or was it just small edits along the way?
Uh, it was, I think the first one was just to get it finished.
Yeah.
Um, because what happened was I got to 40,000 words and I just didn't know. It had started out as an experiment and I thought, do I do this or not? And I ended up connecting with a guy named Ben Leroy, who's an editor uh, who had run his own publishing company for a while. He sold that to Simon and Schuster, and he was just he was a freelance editor at the time. And I connected with him, and he uh, said, send me the first 30 pages of your book, and I'll take a look at it. And he did, and he got back to me, and he said, okay, what do you want to know? And I said, I want to know if I'm wasting my time. Should I keep going or just chalk this up to experiment? And he said, finish the damn book and call me and let me edit it. So at that point, I had to finish it because I had somebody kind of waiting for it in a way. And I knew I'd kick myself if I didn't finish it. But yeah, that ended up being a first draft, and Ben edited it. And then I wrote it again, and then I wrote it again. So yeah, it's a long process to go through.
Yeah, yeah, that was my question
I
about.
told you earlier. Then I, my timing is always perfect. So I finish it, finally get it to where I like it in March of 2020. Yeah. And that's when I say, okay, I'm finally ready to send this out into the world, and try to get an agent and do what you're supposed to do. And then, pandemic hits and the world is very different. So
Yeah. And yeah, that was my next question was like that process, because I feel like for a lot of like listeners out there, they get the book, the readers out there, they get the book and they're like, oh, this the writer wrote it, it got printed, now it's in my lap. There's
right.
so much to it. Like there's that, again, that hustle. How was doing all that during a pandemic? Like how was reception with agents and editors? What was that like?
Well, finding an agent is a soul crushing process. And it's a very slow process at the best of times, but the pandemic slowed it down even more. Um, and it, if you don't have thick skin before you start looking for agents, that you will get it very quickly, because you better be ready for rejection once those queries start going out. So yeah, I was very fortunate. And I tell you what, I didn't know anything about the publishing industry. I knew quite a bit about the magazine world of being in that for several years, but nothing about the publishing industry. And maybe I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was absolutely shocked at how kind and generous the people I met and continue to meet in that industry have been. Um, when I was writing the first draft of the book, I read a wonderful novel called The Second Girl by David Swenson,
Hmm.
and it just blew me away. And I sent him a fan email and just said, man, I read this book and I just loved it. So different from other detective fiction I've read. And then I just put a little aside. I'm a magazine writer and I'm trying to write a book. I don't know what I'm doing. And he emailed, and I thought this will go to his publicist or his agent or something. The guy emails me back and says, oh, I'd love to take a look. Send me a couple of chapters. I mean, just, and I did. And he sent me a great email back with some wonderful quotes. And those quotes were very helpful when I was querying agents and trying to get a deal.
Yeah.
Some agents, of course, will email you back and say, or not email you at all, just kind of end up out there. But some will email you and say, yeah, it's not for me, but try my friend so-and-so at this agency. This might be her cup of tea, and I'm very grateful to people like that. There were quite a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah. And I think that's important for people to hear. I know we haven't talked a lot about graveyard fields, but your journey, I feel, is important to be out there,
sure.
like starting later in life. Hustle, bad timing, good luck.
Right.
There are two questions that came through while we were talking. I want to get to them and just kind of switch up the flow a little bit.
Yeah.
One, I usually say their name. This one is Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Great YouTube name. But they ask, has your family, we talked about the locations, but has your family influenced anything in the book?
Uh, Yeah, sure. I think so. Just growing up in Crusoe, I mean, you can't even call it a one red light town because it doesn't even have a red light. And it's just this little community, basically a 9-mile stretch in Western North Carolina. But yeah, just growing up there, kind of in a bubble in a way, and very close to my family. Not all of them lived in Crusoe, but most of were in Western North Carolina.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of friends and family certainly were influences. Yeah, when writing this.
Definitely. And speaking of influences, you mentioned Connolly kind of said, hey, if he gets to write this, why can't I write this? And then you mentioned a few other books. Were there any other books you want to like talk about that were influential to you, that inspired you or realize, hey, I can do this?
I don't think anything led me to believe I could do it other than my own stupidity and thinking, yeah, why not give this a try? But I talk about Conley and Chandler and John Sanford. I just love detective series where you have the same characters, the same world, and you just itching for the next one to come out because these characters begin to feel like your friends. You just want to see what the next adventure is that they get into. And that's why I set Graveyard Fields up as a series. I really thought if this works and I can get this out in the world, I would like to continue with these characters and just keep throwing bizarre situations at them and see where they end up.
Definitely.
So yeah, detective series are really big influence.
Definitely. And then speaking of series, Erica asks, do you plan on writing a second book?
Thank you, Erica. Yes, I have already written a second book, or at least the first draft of one. It's called Cruel River, and it's the sequel to Graveyard Fields, and that's right now scheduled to come out in late spring, early summer of next year.
And with detective mysteries, I've noticed there's a few different types. There's one where yes, you should read every single one, but then they could kind of be standalones where you could pick
Right,
it up at
right.
any point. But then there's other ones that are really intricately wound or woven. Well, how do you kind of envision these? Are they more of that like yes, it's good to read everything, but I could read the next one on its own, or how? What's your opinion, or how do you feel it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, with just having finished the second one, and that's something I dealt with in writing the second one was, do I need to give away everything that happened the first time? So somebody just coming to this at book two can catch up, or do I leave this background or the first book kind of a mystery? Um, I think that's a tough tough rope to walk because I kind of like knowing exactly what's happened before when I get into a series. So I will invariably go to I'll go to the author's website and say, show me the books in order because I
Yeah.
want to go from I think of them, almost like a TV series or a mini series. I want to start with episode one and go through it step by step.
Yeah.
And I know some authors do not write them that way. You can come in at book 3 or 4 or 12 and be just fine. But I kind of like to go in order. And that's probably how I'll set this up as it continues. Yeah.
With this second book, since it's at least a draft is written, it sounds like, was there outlining? Was it just, hey, I'm going page one again? How
No,
different?
I outlined this one. Yeah, I learned my lesson the first time. Yeah, don't just now, some authors can do that. Just let the story evolve organically. I can't. So I did a lot of outlining and thinking beforehand before even opening the laptop this time.
For sure. And was it this is a silly question. Was it as enjoyable like the writing process, like knowing
Oh,
where
yeah.
everything was going? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Maybe even more so because with this one I had a deadline.
Yeah.
Whereas before, like I said, it was an experiment. I didn't know if I would finish it.
Mhm.
This one, I had a deadline to get it to an editor. And I need a deadline to get things done. And it was enjoyable because I really knew these characters a lot better at this point. So that was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do the second one.
Definitely. And then another question coming in from Kevin. Who would you like to see play Davis in a movie? Any
Ah,
casting?
I have not thought about that actually. So
Hmm.
I'm sorry to disappoint Kevin, but I'm not really. I think there's a picture in my mind of Davis and all the other characters, but I don't know if there's anybody out there that I could match that to at this point.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like that's always hard because when you're creating these characters, like they're their own humans. They're not, Leonardo DiCaprio or whoever
Right,
playing
right.
them. Yeah. Um, so your second book in this series is coming out. Another question is, do you think you would write another series? Like there's Davis and then maybe another detective or whatever. Is that in your mind, or are you strictly focused on Davis now?
No, that's a great question. I've tried to think. I mean, I've got a lot of work to do with the second book to get it where it needs to be. But yeah, so I am thinking what's next after that, and I'm not sure if will I will eventually continue with Davis and his cast of characters. I don't know if that will necessarily be the third book I do, or maybe the third book will just be a one-off about something totally different. And then I'll come back to Davis and see what he's up to
Hmm.
years from now. I'm not really sure.
Definitely. Do you feel that mystery is always going to be what you write? Like,
No, I don't think so. No, I like to try different things. But yeah, I certainly do want to continue with Davis. I think he's got a lot of life left in him and a lot of stories there.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like the small town, is you kind of get the murder she wrote syndrome is, how many people
Sure.
can die in this little town
Yeah.
before people really get suspicious.
Yeah, that's true. You have to a fine balance you have to
Right.
do. I just like that you referenced Murder She Wrote, a classic show. Um, Now that you've written a book, now that you've written a second book or at least a draft, what is one piece of advice you would have given yourself before you started the experiment? What's the one thing you wish old Stephen knew prior to Graveyard Fields?
Uh, Not to wait so long to ask for help. Um, I, I mentioned I got halfway through it and didn't. I reached a crossroads of, do I continue or do I just stop? And someone gave me a great piece of advice and said, do not wait until you're finished to find an editor and or talk about this to someone and get some help. And I wish I'd done that a little earlier, because I think someone would have said, hey, you need to outline this thing. You need to do some more research, get this kind of clear in your head. You may not need the whole story clear in your head, but you do need a direction of where you're going. And that would have saved me a whole lot of time and headache. But yeah, I think that's the one thing I would have done when I would have done differently. And that's the advice I would give to anybody starting out, is just, and I really didn't, because it was an experiment, I didn't talk to a whole lot of people about it. I didn't, there was just maybe a handful of really good friends that I said, hey, here's kind of what I'm trying to do
Yeah.
in my off hours. I didn't want to tell a lot of people because I didn't want to disappoint them when I didn't want them to ask a year later, hey, whatever happened to that book you were writing? And me say, oh, well.
Speaking
But
of
yeah,
friends,
ask for help.
yeah, speaking of friends, this is a similar question that was asked earlier, but we're getting a few. And Phyllis asked, where did you base Floppy off anyone? Was he based off of friends?
Floppy is based on, I have to be careful. No, Floppy's based, when I was a kid, I knew a couple of guys much older than me who talked about a guy named Floppy. And I just thought this was bizarre. I never met the guy. I didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him. But once in a while, they would just say, oh, did you hear what Floppy was doing yesterday? And that name just, even when I was 10 years old, that name just stuck in my head.
Sure.
But yeah, there are a couple of true life people that Floppy is based on, and then several fictional people in my head that Floppy's based on. But yeah.
Definitely. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your book and your personal journey. I mean, your book is terrific, but I think your story is also just something people need to know if they want to write. It's okay to take a leap and just start on page one.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly.
Where can readers find you on the internet? What's the best way to connect?
So my website is StephenTingle.com, STEVENTINGLE.com. So there's all kinds of information there.
Awesome. Perfect. We will send people your way. And just a reminder to everyone in the chat, I put a link to Stephen's book. So if you don't have it, you can get it at tatteredcover.com. Stephen, thank you so much for doing this with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I know having a debut during an ongoing pandemic is rough,
yeah,
but
why not? Right.
We're supporting you here in Denver, and we're so glad that you wrote this book.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Have a great one, Stephen.
Yeah. Take care.
Cool. We are no longer live, even though it says we're live. Thanks so much.